What are you doing this meeting? Hello, hello to everybody. How are you doing tonight? Better switch our stuff up here. We are here tonight for Bedtime Stories. If you are here, let me know in the chat. And I'll tell you a little bit about Bedtime Stories. Is during the pandemic starting in 2020, I felt like there needed to be a community. So back then I started to do bedtime stories, and on those and during that time, we picked a book as a group to do that. You can look back on my YouTube channel, and that way you can see what we're all about. So every night I would go live and read a chapter of a book. Let's see, the first book we did was Beaches, Bungalows, and Burglaries. And the second book we did was A Charming Crime. So you can actually scroll back and look at those if you'd like. And also, while you're here, is I have been able to share my real audio books with you by the real narrator here for free on my YouTube channel. And I hope you take advantage of that. They are narrated, professionally narrated. They're not narrated by me. But the bedtime stories is something that I do here. So, but also you'll eventually be able to get this story on audiobook here as well. But currently there are, let's see, I have the first holiday cozy mystery audiobook, Four Leaf Felony, as a free listen here. And if you don't want to listen here, then you can obviously buy it other places, but here it's free. And then I also have the first 6 audiobooks by narrator Karen Savage in the Magical Cure series. So we are going to start reading Scene of the Grind. I will try to be here every night around 7 o'clock. I do have some plans to go camping, and I won't be able to make those days, but you won't miss anything because I will have those chapters recorded for you. First chapter, Scene of the Grind. All right. Drip, drip, drip. There is something about coffee that brings people together, and they don't even have to like coffee. Is it the smell? Is it the comforting sound of the drip? I didn't know. All I did know was that my new coffee shop in the touristy lake town of Honey Springs, Kentucky, the Bean Hive, was open for business. 7 a.m., I muttered after I'd glanced up at the clock and drew my eyes back out the front doors of the coffee house located in the best spot on the boardwalk that ran along Lake Honey Springs. The boardwalk held fond memories for me since I was used to spend my summers here with my Aunt Maxine, Maxie for short. And for the past year of my life was stalled in a little bit of what I'd call a fork in the road. So after hearing Aunt Maxie talk about all the revitalization of the boardwalk and not really knowing what to do, it sounded like a splendid idea to open a shop at the time. The annual Honey Festival was in a couple of days, and the vendors and the new shops on the boardwalk were holding a grand opening. I'd already had the coffee house ready to open since when I moved to Honey Springs a few weeks ago. I made it a point to no longer sit around resting on my laurels, so I opened the shop a few days early, which might not have been the best business plan since my only customers had been a few stragglers here and there. Mainly construction workers who were working day and night to get the shops ready for the big festival. The Bean Hive was located in the middle of the boardwalk, right across from the pier. It was a perfect spot, and I was beyond thrilled with the exposed brick walls, the wooden ceiling beams that I didn't have to touch. Luckily, Aunt Maxie owned the place. I mean, the rent was a little steep, But I've watched a few DIY videos on YouTube to figure out how to make the necessary repairs for the inspections. I couldn't be more pleased with the shiplap wall I'd created myself out of plywood painted white to make it look like real shiplap. Instead of inventing a fancy menu or even menu boards that attached to the wall, I bought four large chalkboards that hung down from the ceiling over the L shaped glass countertop. The first chalkboard menu hung over the pie counter and listed the pies and the cookies with their prices. The second menu hung over the torts and quiches. The third menu, before the L shaped counter curved, listed the breakfast casseroles and drinks. Over top the other counter, the chalkboard listed lunch options, including soups and catering information. On each side of the counter was a drink stand. One was for a coffee bar with six industrial thermoses with different blends of my special coffees, as well as one filled with a decaffeinated blend, even though I clearly never understood the concept of that. But Aunt Maxie made sure I understood some people only drink the unleaded stuff. The coffee bar had everything you needed to take a coffee with you, even an honor system where you could pay and go. The drink bar on the opposite end of the counter was a tea bar. Hot tea, cold tea. There was a nice selection of gourmet teas and loose leaf teas along with cold teas. I'd even gotten a few of those antique teapots from the Wild and Whimsy antique shop, which happened to be the first shop on the boardwalk. If a customer came in and wanted a pot of tea, I could fix it for them, or they could fix their own to their taste. A few cafe tables dotted the inside, along with two long window tables with stools butted up to them on each side of the front door. It was a perfect spot to sit and enjoy the beautiful Lake Honey Springs and sip on your favorite beverage, which just so happened to be where I was sitting this morning, enjoying the view until I realized I'd been here almost since 4 a.m. to get the casseroles made and the coffees brewed before the opening time of 7 a.m., and no one was here. You did open a little early, I said to make myself feel better, and hooked my fingers in the mug of the freshly brewed coffee. Curling both hands around the mug, I leaned my hip up against the counter and took a sip. Even if no one showed up today, it was better than where I was a year ago. My chin lifted as the first rays of sunshine popped through the large front windows. I closed my eyes and let the breaking of the dawn fill my soul. It was spring in Kentucky, and the leaves were starting to get their deep green color back, filling in the tree line along the lake. A few fishing boats had trolled by since it was a no wake zone. Good fishing started around 5 a.m. around here, and they were usually back by 7. At the far end of the pier was a marina with boat slips and a really neat little restaurant, the Watershed. It was probably the fanciest restaurant in Honey Springs. With my mug in my hand, I decided to get a whiff of the fresh air. The bell dinged over the front door when I opened it. Cool air swept in, reminding me that spring in Kentucky was cold, the mornings and hot in the afternoon. Dressing was always a problem, but with the few uniform pieces I'd picked out to go with my black pants and sensible shoes, I'd handled the change easily. Besides, the black apron with the Bean Hive logo was amazing, and I've gotten several of those. Today I decided on the thin long sleeve crew neck that had tied the apron over it. Since there wasn't anyone in the coffee house, I decided to stroll to the right of the coffee house on the boardwalk and do a little window shopping, even though most of them weren't opening until the grand opening this weekend. I walked all the way around to the end and looked as I made my way back, enjoying my cup of coffee and the morning sunrise as it dripped in many colors on the lake. It was funny how water would turn orange and yellow rays different colors as it mirrored in the lake. The shops were really coming along, and all the shops were butted next to each other with a different awning to boast the name of the shop. Every few feet, there was a couple of cafe tables where visitors could shop and stop to enjoy each other or just view the boardwalk. Wild and Whimsy was the first shop on the boardwalk. It was an eclectic shop of antiques and repurposed furniture. Beverly and Dan Teagarden were the owners, and their two grown children, Savannah and Melanie, helped them run it. Instead of the regular shingle roof, Dan had paid extra to put on a rusty tin roof to go with the store's theme. They kept the awning in red color, but without the name. The Wild and Whimsy sign dangled down. Honeycomb Salon and Spa was located next, and it was fancy for Honey Springs. Alice D. Spicer was the owner, and from what I overheard through the gossip line, Alice had gotten really good at new techniques from a fancy school. Next to the Honeycomb Salon and Spa was the Buzz In and Out Diner, owned by James Farley. Honey Springs' very first tattoo parlor, Odd Ink, was next to the diner. I wasn't sure who owned that. In fact, I didn't know any of the owners. It was just an idle gossip from Maybelle and Bunny's morning coffee run that kept me in the know. They'd also said all about the details. A new event center was going in next to the tattoo place, along with the bridal shop, Queen for the Day. Then there was me, the Bean Hive. The bait and tackle shop was the only shop that was on the pier. It was perfect for the tourists who wanted to fish for the day off the pier. They never closed like most of the past shops since the lake always had fishermen. There was a difference. The annual Honey Festival was also in a couple of days, hence the grand opening of the shops. And it did bring visitors far and wide to get a good sampling of our fine Kentucky honey and festival activities. This year, the town council, of which my Aunt Maxie sits on the board, decided to move the festival from Central Park to downtown Honey Springs to the boardwalk. Vendors were going to be setting up along the boardwalk across from the shops. I was especially excited to purchase some fresh honey and honeycombs for the coffee house. I'd yet to venture past my shop, but I did know that there was some sort of clothing boutique, a knick-knack shop, a spa, a bar, and at the very end was Crooked Cat Bookstore, which was an independent bookstore. I'd spent many hours in my summer visits there, fondly remembering a cat that snuggled up to me in the bean bag. The smell of fresh coffee drifted out of the coffee house exactly how I envisioned it would. The warm scent filled me with joy where I wasn't sure if I could ever have joy anymore. When I opened the door to head back in, I smiled. The Bean Hive was a dream only a year ago and now a reality. I'd created it in my head and had worked hard to make the dream become real. After I filled my cup again, I walked back to the kitchen to check the casseroles. I put the oven for the afternoon lunch. I only cooked one thing a day for breakfast and lunch. I baked several things for the customers to enjoy and take home. The Bean Hive was a coffee house, not a restaurant, but we all know that food goes well with teas and coffees. It was my way of offering something for everyone. Today's special was a sausage casserole that paired great with any flavored coffee or tea. Everything was made fresh, which made the coffee house fill with amazing, stomach rumbling aromas no one could refuse. The bell over the door dinged, and I rushed back to the dining area to greet the customer. I'm telling you, something is wrong. Bunny Bowowski waddled into the bean hive with her brown pocket hook hung in the crook of her arm. She didn't answer her phone all night last night. You know, I was there just around 8 o'clock, and I did notice the strangest thing. Maybelle Donovan stopped just inside the door and put her hand on Bunny's forearm. You know those little plug-in candles that are in each one of her windows? I do. Bunny rolled her eyes. We downright got into a fight over them candles. In July last year, I told her that it was not Christmas and she needed to take them things down. In fact, it was hotter than a firecracker, not nary a thought of snow, and she said it was decoration. Good morning, ladies. I greeted them like I'd done the past 2 mornings around this time. According to Aunt Maxie, Bunny Bowowski and Maybelle Donovan never left the house unless they were dressed in a dress, a shawl or coat depending on the weather, and some sort of hat that sat on their heads like a bow, as if it were completing the package. They'd been friends for a long time. They even resembled each other. Both had the exact same haircut. Their gray hair was parted to the side and cut to chin length. They both carried a brown pocketbook, and they both held them perfectly in the crook of their right elbows. Both of them were on the beautification committee. They came down every morning to get a look at the boardwalk to make sure everything was progressing right on schedule. Good morning to you, Bunny nodded and began to walk up to the counter. Those are lovely daffodils. Well, thank you. I scooted them over to the right a little more so I could get a good view of my two customers. Aren't they the most vibrant yellow you've ever seen? Her brows formed a V. I got them at the farmer's market when I picked up my fresh produce and fruit. And this, I tapped the vase, very proud of my find. I found this for $1 at the Wild and Whimsy. They do have some steals for an antique store. She rotated the clear hourglass vase that had a tin top and a round hole where the flowers went. She ran her finger along the etched flowers in the glass. Well, you certainly got a bargain. Yes, I was very pleased. I pushed back a strand of my wavy black hair. Wavy was a loose term for springy, natural, curly hair on my head seemed to sprout as soon as water touched it. No matter how much I had it straightened, tried to straighten, or even had it in a ponytail, a stray strand of hair sprung out from somewhere. I glanced toward Maybelle. They weren't the spryest of women, but they certainly got around just fine. How do? Maybelle gave a slight bow. Something smells delicious. You are just in time for my country sausage casserole. I pointed to the glass pan I'd just taken out of the oven. The melted cheese was still bubbling around the edges where it had not cooled off yet. I'm letting it cool off so I can cut a nice thick slice. I found it best to let a dish cool for around 10 minutes to not only let the casserole set, but to let the flavors deepen and simmer within the ingredients. If you'd like to have a cup of coffee while you wait for a slice of the casserole, I'd love to get you some. Oh, Roxanne, you do know us, don't you? Bunny gave me a theatrical wink. She pointed to one of the few cafe tables I had provided for the customers. Well, we'll go over there. I leaned my way over the counter and whispered like I had a grand secret. You can call me Roxy. All my friends do. Roxy, with the amazing eyes, Bunny winked. You do have beautiful blue eyes. Well, thank you, I smiled, grateful for the compliment. I poured two ceramic coffee mugs with the Bean Hive's own Highlander grog and set them on a small round tray, along with one of the silver cow cream pictures I'd also gotten on sale at the Wild and Whimsy. Most of the china and silver I'd bought for the Bean Hive coffee house was from there as well. And since the old things did go well with the exposed brick walls, wood pallet furniture, and the big comfy chairs I'd used to decorate the shop, as well as the old tin signs and the chalkboard menu that hung over the counter. Roxy, a big smile curled up on her face. Now that's a name with character. That's what I hear, I chuckled and excused myself, where I retreated back to the kitchen. For years, I'd gotten up way before the rooster crowed, so to speak, which was about 4 a.m. around these parts. Only I hadn't been in these parts. Only recently had I moved back to Honey Springs. I'm not sure if it was to get away from my life I'd left behind due to my divorce, or if I needed a little bit of familiarity or comfort. Regardless, I am what I'd like to call a retired lawyer, even at the young age of 30. Retired because after my divorce, I hated lawyers. It was then that I listened to all that junk about following your passion, doing what you love, life is too short, yada, yada. One 4 a.m. morning, I couldn't sleep and fixed myself a cup of coffee. It was then and there that I decided I wanted to go to barista school, and I never looked back. The shops are looking great, I called over my shoulder on the way back to the kitchen to check the rest of the casseroles before I stuck the lunch ones in. We are pleased as peaches on how Kane Construction has really stayed on schedule, I heard Bunny say after I walked through the door to the kitchen. Kane Construction? A lump formed in my throat at the sound of the name. It was very hard to swallow, and I shook my head to make the thought go away. What on earth? I looked at the conventional oven with the morning sausage casserole in it and noticed the digit buttons weren't lit up. I hit the oven buttons and nothing. I opened the oven door and the casseroles were still runny and lumpy. I stuck my hand in the oven. It was cold, not a lick of heat. Great, I groaned and hurried back to the couple look at the four casseroles I had in there and moved them to the other conventional oven next to it, where I crammed them in with the lunch quiches. This is going to have to work. I gulped, knowing it probably wasn't going to work since both of them required different cooking temperatures. I headed back into the shop and grabbed my cell phone out of the pocket of my apron and dialed my Aunt Maxine. Aunt Maxie, I'm so glad you answered. My rapidly beating heart settled down after I heard the comforting around her voice. This better be good. Well, the tone in her voice wasn't happiness. I need my beauty sleep. I'm on the prowl, you know. Yeah, prowl. My aunt was in her mid 60s and widowed. Widowed as a young age, too. But as far as I knew, she was happily single. Okay, listen, can you hurry down to the shop and grab some of the lunch quiches for me and put them in your oven to bake? I asked. You didn't call a handyman yet? She let me know that she'd warned me several times after I'd rented the place how the previous owner of the restaurant had undercooked food and eventually got shut down by the health department. No, I muttered, knowing I really should have listened to her, but the cost was something I wasn't able to afford right now. I was trying to wait until this first week was open and then I'd hire someone. I'm going to say I told you so, just because I can say I told you so, and you won't give me no sass back. I told you so, she said in a playful tone. I'll be right over. Thank you so much. I love you, and I know you love me. I sighed as the relief escaped me. There weren't too many times Aunt Maxie didn't save me. In fact, the reason why I'd come back to Honey Spring was due to her. I love my mom, but she seemed to hoover around me when I would gone home to Lexington after my divorce. Aunt Maxie had lived in Honey Springs all of her life, and she was my dad's sister. Unfortunately, he died of cancer years ago, and I'd spent summers here with Aunt Maxie in the cozy town that'd become a second home to me. I loved the small shops scattered throughout the town, but the boardwalk and the pier were my favorite spots in Honey Spring. Aunt Maxie owned a few rental properties, the Bean Hive being one, as well as the Crooked Cat bookstore, plus a couple of residential places. Unfortunately for me, she didn't have any houses available, so I bought a pretty little rundown cabin along the lake and only a 4-minute bike ride from the coffee shop. It was a perfect place to live, but needed a few upgrades. Still, it was mine, and I loved every part of it, even the broken ones. Are you ladies ready for your slice of country sausage casserole? I asked and sliced into the warm casserole, plating two nice sized pieces on the lattice milk glass plates. Here you go. I set a plate down in front of each of them. This looks amazing, Roxy. Bunny leaned over the plate. She closed her eyes and inhaled. Smells delicious too. There was nothing as satisfying to me as seeing someone who enjoyed something I'd made with my hands. Thank you. I took a step back and put my hands in my prayer position up in front of my face. I'm honored. I hope you enjoyed the taste too. I'm sure we will, she said. Maybelle didn't have to say anything. She'd already dug right in and was on her third bite. I walked over to the door, not only to see if Aunt Maxie was on her way, but to see if there was anyone walking around the boardwalk who I could offer a free coffee to. Even if some of the construction workers were employed by Kane, there was a lot of construction going on, and even they had to eat or at least warm up with my coffee. My eyes scanned the workers to make sure I didn't see anyone I knew from the past summers here. There was a bit of satisfaction and a bit of sadness when I didn't recognize any of them, and it was probably a good thing. You've outdone yourself with this one, Maybelle called from behind me and forced me to come back out of my memories that were good and bad. Thank you so much. I stared down the boardwalk where a tall, lean man with a yellow hard hat was standing next to the new beauty salon and spa. He had a set of plans rolled up in front of him. A couple of men on each side of him were looking at the plans. They nodded and spoke to each other. The early morning chill had yet to give way to the spring afternoon weather. I knew the spa was going to be open along with most of the other shops before the annual Spring Honey Festival in hopes they'd bring tourists we needed to revitalize the sleepy town. That was one of the reasons I moved back. The fond memories of lazy days spent on the pier and watching all the people going in and out of the shops outweighed the only bad memory I had. Those days had been long gone, and now I was going to do my part to help bring back Honey Springs. Not only did Honey Springs economy need it, I needed it. I needed to help restore my soul. Are you okay? I asked on my way back to the counter. They nodded and went back to discussing their friend who apparently hadn't shown up for a meeting or something. I grabbed a thermos that could hold 6 cups of coffee and stuck it up under the Bun Industrial coffee maker to fill it. While it filled up, I gathered a few to-go cups. I ran a finger over the cute Bean Hive logo I'd designed. It was fun to see the bean that had a coffee bean for a body come to life as the materials I printed for merchandise as well as the marketing materials. The bell over the door dinged and I looked up. Alexis Rourke! Bunny greeted the petite blonde. We were just discussing where you've been. You have? Alexis Rourke wore her blonde hair in a conservative nature with a bob cut just beneath her ears and straight across bangs. She had on a pair of tennis shoes, khakis, and a pullover hoodie with the Honey Springs logo on it. I even went by your house and saw your decorative candles weren't lit up. Maybelle eyed her suspiciously. Why, Maybelle Donovan, Alexis drew her hand up to her chest. You do care about me. Well, of course we do. Bunny pushed back the only extra chair at the cafe table. Sit. She patted the seat. Where have you been? Alexis waved her off and was content standing next to the table. Well, I don't have time to sit. I've got to open up the shop. Maxine Bloom is at it again. She said my aunt's name with exhaustion. Raising the rent on the bookstore. I'm going to have to stop volunteering at the Pet Palace. Why? Because you volunteer for Maxine? Bunny asked and sipped on her coffee. No, so I can keep the bookstore open an extra day. I close early on Friday so I can go volunteer. No more. She shook her head. She pointed at me and shook her finger. I hear you're Maxine's niece. You hear right, I offered a warm smile in hopes she didn't hold it against me that my Aunt Maxine was her landlord. Did I also hear you say that you're the owner of the Crooked Cat bookstore? I am. Her eyes narrowed as though she was sizing me up. I have fond memories of your bookstore when I used to come visit during the summer. A happy sigh escaped me. I remember sitting in that big purple bean bag that was in the front window next to the cat tree. You had that little gray cat in that amazing banned book section. I'll be. I remember your eyes. A smile formed and reached her eyes. They twinkle as though the memory was bright. That's when Maxine and I got along. She'd bring you in there while she was doing her property rounds and tell you to read books. I knew I was watching you. Well, I believe my love of reading stems from you and all the time that I have spent in your store. I pointed to the coffee maker. Can I get you a cup of coffee on the house? Ours wasn't, Maybelle grumbled under her breath. I would love one to go. And give me one of them cake donuts. She pulled her chin to the side and tilted her eyes over her shoulder as she enjoyed the look on Maybelle's face. With a to go cup of coffee and the Bean Hive bag filled with donut, she bid her friends goodbye. I'll see y'all at the town council meeting tomorrow. I've got a few things to say about this zoning thing and Maxine Bloom. She skirted out of the shop. Maybelle and Bunny put their heads together and both tried to whisper above the other. I figured it was a good time to take the workers the coffee. I'll be back, I said. I'm going to run some coffee down to the workers. I held up the thermos along with the cups. The sun was popping up over the trees that stood along the lake like soldiers and filtered over the calm waters of the lake. There was a couple of small bass boats running side by side with a couple of men in them, probably looking for a good inlet to bass fish. The wood boards of the boardwalk groaned underneath each step I took as I got closer to the group of men. Good morning, I greeted them. I'm Roxanne Bloom, owner of the Bean Hive. I gestured toward the coffee shop. I've made all this coffee and only a few customers have come in. I left out the fact that I'd only had the same customers all week long. And I'd hate to see this fresh coffee go to waste. So I thought I'd bring some to y'all. Well, that's mighty nice of you, the tall man grinned from underneath his hard hat. He kept his eyes on the thermos. One of the men took the cups out of my hand while the other took the thermos. We appreciate that, don't we, boys? The man's deep voice echoed off the limestone banks of the lake. The glare of the sun reflecting off the lake made it difficult for me to see his face. The men thanked me. Now, if y'all are hungry, I also serve food, I smiled and clasped my hands in front of me. I was definitely trying to use the old saying that a way to a man's heart was through his stomach. Not that I was trying to get into any of their hearts, I wasn't, but I was trying to get to their stomachs, which led to their wallets. Enjoy, I said. Oh, we will, and we will return the thermoses, the man said before he went back to pointing out things about the spa. It was my cue to head on back, and they had work to do, and so did I. Hello, honey. Aunt Maxine was leaning her bike against the outside of the shop. She pulled off her knit cap. She tucked the hat in the purse that was strapped across her body and pulled out a can of hairspray. She raked her hands upward through her hair and used her other hand to spray it so high to heaven. You know, you need a bike rack. I do need a bike rack, but I also need to get a new oven or have this one looked at. I opened the door for her and let her walk in before me. New hair color since yesterday? She gave the newly blonde colored hair another good spray before she stuck the can back in her purse and started towards the door. Alice D. Walker down at the Honeycomb says it's all the rage. Makes me feel young as a whippersnipper, she turned to me. The morning sun sprinkled down upon her. I shook my head and realized having her bike up against the coffee house was probably not a good place for it to lean in case someone tripped over it. Most of the community rode bikes everywhere since Honey Springs was a small, compact town that took pride in their landscape and Kentucky bluegrass that made the entire town look like fancy landscape painting. You look like Phyllis Diller. And it wasn't just the hair. Aunt Maxie had put on a little too much makeup. Well, well, if it's not Maxine Bloom. Bunny Bowowski didn't seem all that happy to see Aunt Maxie. And with a new hairdo, you'll serve just about anybody. Aunt Maxie curled her nose at me. Oh, you two know each other? I asked, hoping to bring a little peace between them. Know her? Bunny scoffed. She's been down at the Moose trying to get her claws into Floyd, my man. Don't flatter yourself, Bunny. I want a man that can walk without stopping every 2 feet so he can get his footing up under him so he don't fall. Aunt Maxie drew her chin in the air and looked down her nose. Besides, that's not what's got you all worked up. Aunt Maxie is why I've come to Honey Springs. I patted my aunt on the back. I used to come here when I was a child and spend many summers here, right here in this very spot when it was a diner. I love being here so much that I decided to move here and open the Bean Hive. I'd hoped that their mutual like for me would at least bring them together. The last thing I needed was for my only two paying customers to boycott me because of Aunt Maxie. We will see you tomorrow, Roxy. Bunny stood up and motioned for Maybelle to follow. We've got committee stuff to do. The three women gave each other the Baptist nod, where they didn't wish ill will, but not necessarily success. The Southern women's way around good manners. I'm glad they're gone, Aunt Maxie spouted out and walked to the back of the shop. She put her hands on her hips and looked around. Well, this looks good, she said in approval. Many customers? Nope. You just ran off the only two I've had since I opened. I gave her a wry look. Cup of coffee? I can't. I've got to get your casseroles and head to the meeting. It's hard being a councilwoman. Aunt Maxine had held the office for over 30 years and was pretty proud of it. That's why old Bunny is all mad. She and her group of cronies think that just because we're in a craft group together, that I'll just let them do whatever they want regarding the festivals and the beautification committee. Apparently, Aunt Maxie didn't agree on something in their meeting. And it didn't surprise me. Aunt Maxie wasn't one to go along with the crowd when she was passionate about something. There were two things I knew not to get into with others: politics and religion. Around here, both were just as important as a newborn baby, a wedding, or a funeral. There aren't too many worried about whether it is what you've made them mad about. They are just worried about if one of them's your friend, Aunt Maxie said. What? Who? Aunt Maxie perked up and walked on my heels on her way back to the kitchen. I don't know. I can't remember her name. She actually came in. I grabbed the two lunch quiches I'd taken out of the oven earlier and wrapped them in tinfoil, pinching the sides as tight as I could. She owns the Crooked Cat. Alexis Rourke, Aunt Maxie groaned. I laughed and stacked the two quiches. She said that you two are fond of each other. Don't get me started on her because I don't come with breaks. Aunt Maxie picked up the quiche. You know those leftover donuts you gave me yesterday? Yes. What about them? I asked. Well, I took them to her last night, sort of a peace offering, Aunt Maxie said. She was just fine, so there was no need to worry about her. Those women love to worry. If they aren't gossiping or worried about someone, they're dead. They were happy to see her and that she was okay. I was just about to ask her about Alexis's claim that Aunt Maxie was going to raise the rent, but the bell over the shop dinged, alerting me to someone had come in. Aunt Maxie and I looked up. Well, good morning, Maxine. The man that I'd taken the coffee to took off his hard hat with his left hand, and his right gripped the thermos. Good to see you. Aunt Maxie's joy of seeing the man was evident all over her face. Even her eyes tipped up in corners with giddiness. Well, I want to thank you for the coffee. My men appreciate your kindness. His features were familiar, and his big brown eyes were warm and matched his tender smile. I'm glad to see the two of you have mended ways. I believe everything happens for a reason. Aunt Maxie walked over to the door as she recited her favorite saying. I'll have these back to you in a couple of hours. See you later, Patrick. Patrick? I took a deeper look into the man standing in front of me. Patrick Kane? I looked a little deeper. Patrick Kane? My heart sank. Chapter 1, Scene of the Grind, our first night of Bedtime Stories with Tonya. I hope you guys enjoyed chapter 1. I love this book. And we will read a chapter a night until we're finished. Some nights it might be 2 chapters, depending on how big they are. But we have had, Rowena has been sitting here this whole time watching me read to her. Right. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed chapter 1. Hello, Charlene. Hello, Wendy. Thank you for commenting, and I will see you guys tomorrow night for chapter 2 of Scene of the Grind. So set your dingy bell to get an alert when I go live, and I will see you later.